to put on the ballot and passed. So him and Mario and Jessica are great advocates here for the state, for this plant. So thank you for all your dedication to this plant and helping the patients get their medicine. So thank you for being here, Tyler.
Thank you for having me. I'm a big fan of cannabis. I wouldn't want to compare myself to Mario though. He does pretty awesome work there. Yeah. So my name's Tyler Hacking. It's nice to have all of you here today. Thanks for having me. I spent the last 20 years in the cannabis industry. I went on my first farm when I was 14, and my friend Wes, he said, "Hey man, come out to California with me." And told my mom I was gonna go work on an apple farm. Didn't see her for a while. And I learned all sorts of cool stuff. So I come from the, part of my past is the same place as you, Northern California. And
never asked why the pies didn't get sent home.
Yeah. So I spent a lot of time in Mendocino County, Humboldt County, and just bouncing around different farms. I used to sit on the side of the road with a sign that I drew some scissors on with permanent markers so I could get trimming jobs, Yeah, so you make friends that way, and I was lucky enough to learn from some really cool people, and I continued from there to go to Washington, Oregon. I was in Colorado the first 4 years of their legalization, and I wound up back here to go back to school. I hit a point where I couldn't learn much more in the environment I was in, and I wanted to pursue an academic career. And now I'm finishing my botany degree at UVU. It's super awesome.
Yeah.
And I just finished my research project on cannabis use and its impacts on other drug use and health conditions and success. And the results are really interesting. The part that pertains to extraction and concentration, my topic today, was interesting, and it comes from one of the questions that we asked the subjects that we surveyed. We were asking them what type of cannabis they use. Most people use flower, but over 50% of people also use edibles and oil. So extracts are a very popular form of consumption for cannabis. Extraction of cannabis goes really far back in history. It started, to my knowledge, in India. They would actually use their precious silk and put cannabis colas on it, and they would tap the side of it. You can actually find videos of this on YouTube if you look for it. And they would have trays below, and by the end of them doing this, they would have mounds of keef, right? And if you compress keef together, you get hash. You can make hash without heat, but most people heat it up a little bit too. They'll put it between two hot plates and then tie things around it and compress it into a hash brick.
Anybody else melt water?
So the first hash I ever made it's called bubble hash, and essentially you're taking these micron screens. Have you ever on face masks? You know how they're stopping the particles from coming in. They're using very specific sizes of screens. I wanted to compare it to like a window screen, right, but much smaller and finer. And based on the size of the holes in that screen will determine what makes it through that screen, okay? Different cannabinoids and terpenes and plant material, they are different sizes, okay? And the trichomes themselves, when they break off, they can be anywhere between about 20, well, technically 1, all the way up to about 200, 240 microns in size. So I usually transition between those levels. I'll layer it, I'll put a 25 micron on the bottom, 60, 90, 120, up to the 200s, right? And that way I can get a variety of material extracted, okay? And the reason I'm mentioning this separation technique is because you can do it with water, bubble hash like I was talking about, or you can do it with dry ice, which is CO2, by the way. And organic chemistry is defined by the presence of carbon. By definition, CO2 is organic, and you can use it to extract from cannabis in a way that does not provide toxicity at all. It doesn't have any byproducts of that technique, okay? I love dry ice. I've extracted a lot of hash with dry ice. It's one of the simplest ways, in my opinion, and I don't like using water because then you have to deal with getting rid of the water, right? And so in my mind, dry ice is just perfect. And then you can take that material and you can add it into butter. You still need to put it in the oven if you're going to eat it because you have to decarboxylate it, right? The dry ice or other solvents will not decarboxylate it. And let's talk about that. Yeah.
Thank you.
So some of the phytocannabinoids, for example, THCA, it's not bioavailable because of its physical shape. It can't attach to the receptor in your body. That receptor is a certain shape, okay? And when you rip the A off, all of a sudden it is the right shape and it can fit in that receptor. That's called decarboxylation, okay? It's ripping the acetyl group off of the THC, the CBD. So CBDA is another example. If you want to have that CBD be bioavailable, it can't have that acetyl group on it or it won't interact. It'll just come out as waste, essentially. That's why a lot of edibles don't work for people because they didn't decarboxylate it. They didn't take it to specific temperatures and durations in the oven in order to have that effect, okay? And so it's kind of like unlocking the medicine.
You underdid it or overdid it?
Yeah, and you can overdo it too. If you overheat it, you will actually break down the compound. THC has a different decarboxylation boiling point than CBD does, for example, because they have different weights. That's a good way to put that. And the reason I mention that is because if you're going to make stuff at home, you want to make sure to decarboxylate it or it's not going to work. If you're working with fresh plant material, it's going to be a insignificant percentage of the medicine that you could have if you did decarboxylate it. Okay. I really like your infusion. Lipid infusion is awesome. MCT oil specifically is really great because it has a lot of places to attach to. That's a good way to put it, right?
Yeah.
So you can achieve bioavailability and concentration because of, and I'm trying not to use scientific terms, I'm sorry guys, I spend a lot of time around biologists and stuff and they make you use certain terms. So, we call them covalent bonds, okay? And so these fats, these lipids, they're in a structure where they have more covalent bonds, more places for things to attach to. And that maximizes how concentrated that dose can be. And also the other things that can attach to it, like he was mentioning, the terpenes and things like that. So I'm a big fan of using oils and butters. Different oils and butter have different potential for infusion. It's a good way to put it. So you can max out that potential. It doesn't happen very often. It requires quite a lot of plant material, so don't be afraid of, adding in as much as you want. I could bounce around all night. Is there anything you guys have any particular questions about when it comes to extraction?
And he's talking about doing this at home because you can.
Yeah,
you
don't
can
need a lot
bring
of
your own
fancy
stuff
equipment.
home and actually do this. Under the bill, we're allowed to buy our little gelatins, and they had to be in a cube form. But nothing doesn't say that you can't bring that product home and make your own anything. You know what I mean?
I would argue that in some instances you can get a better product that way. There are some methods like what these guys are doing that you can't replicate without specific equipment, okay? That being said, I was faced with this problem in my teens, and I was lucky enough to be around a lot of people who had figured it out already, right? And there's a lot of stuff you can do at home without equipment. And I'm happy to talk about this, but I need to give a disclaimer that it involves using specific legal and easily purchasable hazardous chemicals, and you need to be aware before you use them that they are dangerous. They're labeled that way for a reason. They're flammable. They could be potentially explosive. Don't put them next to a fire stove, okay? If you're gonna go get a bottle of Everclear, for example, keep the lid on it, right? I know people who have been hurt that way, and it kills people.
Yeah, you just gave me a bad flashback to high school.
Yeah.
Jungle
I've had a
juice.
few of those experiences in there. I'm lucky to be here, So, when it comes to CO2, just leave it with that and the material you're working with. Don't add in anything else. Okay. Some people will mix in ice with their CO2, but really that's not an effective technique, I would argue. That's the dry ice extract I was talking to you guys about. Another one that you can do at home is just simple infusion. You can take butter, you can take olive oil, you can take coconut oil, and mix it with plant material. Take that on the stove, let it sit for a while, and
Unless you live in an
use
apartment like me.
Yeah, use a food
My
thermometer.
magical butter machine.
Yep.
Use a food thermometer.
Same thing, yeah.
And look up an alkaloid phytocannabinoid chart, okay, a decarboxylation chart. If you type that in online, you'll be able to find one, and it'll show you different temperatures to take it to based on the the phytocannabinoid you're using. If you wanted to infuse THC into your butter, you can do that. If you wanted to infuse CBD into your butter, you can do that, or into olive oil. But get a food thermometer, an electric one. They're not that much, totally worth it. And then you can take it to that specific temperature for that specific amount of time for it to be medical. You don't want to waste that medicine. It's expensive. And I can't tell you how many processes waste medicine, and that sucks. You want to maximize that, right? But once again, you're at home, so don't go overboard, you know? I heard of a guy that put alcohol in a pressure cooker one time.
Shit.
Things like that. Just be safe, okay? And so that's the other one is alcohol. I love doing ethyl extracts. I think alcohol is beautiful. It's a really nice solvent, in my opinion. Specifically, okay, that depends on the alcohol you're working with. Let me reiterate. I would suggest using things like Everclear. Everclear is awesome. You can buy it by the gallon here now, which is really convenient. Before, they always had them in little. Yeah, now you can get the big one. Oh man, so I like it because it sanitizes everything. It kills anything it touches microbially, so you're not at risk for E. coli. And there is E. coli on cannabis in medical pharmacies in the United States right now. And that's from using bad compost in the crops, right? But to come back to the alcohol, I love alcohol because you can leave the lid off and it will just evaporate out. It's literally just a concentration of hydrogen, right? And hydrogen, if you leave it out in ambient air, it will evaporate. You can add on a little bit of heat, right? Not on a flame stove. Let's be really clear about that. On an electric stove, you can, but just put it on low, and it will evaporate out without damaging your phytocannabinoids. Because once again, if you take the temperature too high, you're going to degrade and burn and break down those cannabinoids. You're going to destroy your medicine. And so you use a low heat to get rid of that hydrogen, and I'm telling you, if you do it correctly, you will not taste alcohol when you're done.
No,
not at all. Hydrogen doesn't really have like a flavor like that unless it's in a concentrated form. So I love alcohol.
Here.
Yeah, don't use isopropyl or anything like that. It's not something that you want to consume after you've used it. I'm trying to think of what else. Those are some of my favorite ones, and then you can also buy a press machine. You can buy a used one and convert it, or you could just buy a brand one online, and essentially they're these two steel plates, right? And one's being held in a position here, and the other one is being pumped down or pumped up, right? And they're heated, and what happens is when you have plant material in there and you squeeze it, you get a material that comes out called rosin, which is really
magic.
Live resin. Yeah, it's a way of saying like terpenes mixed with plant oil is kind of a fancy way to say it. It's the resin of the plant, which is the oils and volatile,
Yes.
terpenes. And,
Definitely.
yeah,
The good resin, not the gross kind you find in the
yeah,
plant, right?
yeah, and that brings us back to the fundamentals of extraction. So let's talk about what extraction means and what concentration means. So extraction is taking something out of something else. Just as simple as that. You could apply that term to a billion other things, right? A billion contexts. Concentration, once you've extracted, what you have extracted is concentrate, because you have more of that by ratio here than you did in its original form when it was mixed with what it had been extracted from. Does that make sense? So it's all about the concentration. A concentrate has a higher ratio of concentration than its original form. That's a really good way to describe that.
I guess that brings me to a question I'm dying to get answered. Is
how do you test the concentration? Like if you're taking an edible and it says 25 milligrams, or how or where?
I usually just eat it. No, I mean,
if you guys need a guinea pig, you can call me.
Anyway,
Patient zero here.
I'll be
There's
right
no
over.
temperature at home.
No.
Like you're putting in your brownies.
Well, you can trust what's on the label, right? But if you made an extract from your own plant material, you would have to get a COA, a certificate of analysis, from a laboratory that can analyze that, and that analysis requires machinery that's very expensive and people who are trained to use it, right? So I ship off for most of my testing. I only do a few tests at my house because the cost of that's too high.
It's probably $200 to $400, somewhere in that range.
It does range a bit,
to do it.
and it's based on the complexity of the phytocannabinoids and techniques you're looking at, right? Like I can do one right now, and it's only about 75 is a good average, $75 per phytocannabinoid, right? And that's just my home kit. But the labs, they can beat that price, right? Based on the kind of test you're doing. So mine's more applicable, like if you're trying to find out if your crop is going hot or not, if it's going to go over the THC percentage, I can come out and tell you that day. Right? As far as a product, I would go through a laboratory because then you have a receipt from this laboratory.
Whoa! God, gee whiz. I hope that's okay.
I did that with my mind.
Is it okay? Oh, good.
That laboratory's report is your report. You know, that laboratory's report is vouching for your product. So use another laboratory. Use a third party. It actually makes your product look better, look non-biased. You don't want to do your own testing because you could fudge your own testing results, essentially. So having someone else say, these are the results, you can confer with this company. Some products will actually put a link on the bottom of their product that says, go to this site to see our test results.
So they would actually come to your house.
Typically, you would mail it to them.
Yeah, you would mail it out. Yeah, they don't come to
I'm on doorstep.
Yeah. You would mail it in.
Go ahead.
There's a place in Utah County that will test things.
Yeah,
There's
ARUL, ARL, and then there's the BYU lab. I'm trying to talk them into doing it. We'll see.
I know the building that it's in, but I don't know.
I'm trying. What's that? Sorry.
I know the building that it's in down in Utah County, but I don't know the name of the business.
There's a few that are testing in Utah County. Yeah, like ARUP is for sure. And then Aeromatics Plant Research is also.
You're my boy. I know who you are and stuff like that. Can you let these guys know a little bit about Green Dreams? I mean,
oh yeah, I totally forgot about that. So I own a consulting business. I'm a cannabis consultant. After learning all of that stuff, I decided the thing I wanted to do the most was help people to be successful because this industry has a 90% fail rate. It's crazy. And honestly heartbreaking. Like I've gotten to know these people. They put their homes on mortgage to get business loans. Some of them have committed suicide, you know, and it's serious. People are risking a lot in this industry, and some of it works out for some people, but not for everybody, you know, and it's really sad. And so just I've seen the impact that this knowledge can have compared to someone doing it their first time, and it's exponential. It's huge, right? I've seen someone grow a plant their first season, and it wasn't very big, and the same a different person used the same genetics, right, and grew a monster. Is a good example of what I'm talking about. Okay, and these agricultural techniques, they're very specific. Cannabis is a weird plant because its biology is. It wants to die. I don't know how else to put it. It's an herbaceous plant. It's dioecious. It's sexual, and it goes through a photocycle, except for autoflowers. And it gets to a point hormonally where it goes through what's called senescence, programmed cell death, and it ripens, right? Because the seeds are in a cola, which is technically a fruit, like a receptacle, kind of like a strawberry is a good way. The seeds are actually achenes, and the seeds on strawberries are also achenes, so that's a really good comparison. So we're all really, anybody growing cannabis is a fruit farmer, a seedless fruit farmer, hopefully. And I've grown so many plants that it just became work eventually, you know.
Not in Utah.
not in Utah. Well, yeah, mostly in California, and I tried to calculate one time, and it got into the hundreds of thousands. But I don't know, because some of them were like thousands of acres, you know, and they were really big projects, right? And so it got to the point where I enjoy experimental cultivation, but other than, you know, growing for my own medicine, I wouldn't be interested in cultivation anymore. But I know that that information is super valuable, and so I wanted to use it to help other people, and it's had that impact. My clients are all repeat clients. They call me back. They give me the best feedback. They tell me that the impact of not only my consultation, but the work I do with them as a result of that is significant in them being successful. Now I'm starting a soil business, which is great. Because the root of most agricultural issues is the soil, and soil can be expensive, and so my goal with this business is to keep the price as low as possible, but to give people the tool that they need to grow this plant in a competitive way. The average per plant yield last year in 2019 in Utah was a 1/4 pound. And it's honestly laughable. It's a super low amount of yield. It really is. And those are the plants that survived, right?
Yeah.
those are the ones that made it through.
Right.
And hemp plants, and I'll use that term loosely, they can average at a good 2 or 3 pounds if you know what you're doing. Even here in Utah's climate, I know people that grew hemp last year and are doing it this year that are getting 2 to 3 pounds per plant right now. And so it's all about how you're doing this, and those techniques are very specific, and I've obsessed over them over the last 20 years and learning any that I didn't know, and it's helped me a lot to be successful at what I'm doing. And do you mind if I talk about my research real quick that I just did?
So your green dreams is your soil?
Yeah, so Green Dreams Come True is my consultation business. Green Dreams Organic will be my soil business, and I'm going to have partners, so I decided to do a second business for that, yeah. But we're going to try to buy everybody's destroyed material. A lot of the farmers in Utah, a lot of my clients had to destroy their material because it went over the point.